Hi everyone, and welcome to week 14 of creative writing. I am your teacher, Hayleigh Worgan. Thank you all so much for joining me, and thank you for your emails over the past week. Those of you who have checked in or turned work in, I really appreciate that, and I hope I have responded and answered all of your questions. Again, if you do have any questions for me, you can always email me. I always include my email address in the PowerPoint presentation I attach to the lesson and in the class comments. So you might notice I'm wearing a mask today. That is because I am doing my lesson from Bookish in Fort Smith. So hopefully we won't have any interruptions, but yeah, we'll just kind of cross our fingers on that one. So today we're going to be talking about setting up our next poem because, again, it is still Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month. And so before we do that, though, there's something I want to address that I think is really important as writers to understand. The first thing is perfectionism. Guys, perfectionism is the enemy of writing. It is the best way to keep a blank page empty. And the most important thing you can ever do when you're faced with a writing assignment, even if you feel like it's super challenging or it's going to be really hard and complicated, or if you think, oh, this will only take me 10 minutes to knock out, then sit down and do it, right? Because if you sit down and you start writing, you might not really know where the words are going to take you, but the thing is, you really can't go anywhere until you take the first step. So, with that in mind, I'd like to read a little selection to you from Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird about perfectionism. I'm going to spend a little bit of time with Anne Lamont today. Your day's work might turn out to have been a mess. So what? Kurt Vonnegut said, "When I write, I feel like an armless, legless man with a crayon in his mouth. So go ahead and make big scrawls and mistakes. Use up lots of paper. Perfectionism is a mean, frozen form of idealism, while messes are a true artist's friend. What people somehow inadvertently unsure forgot to mention when we were children was that we need to make messes in order to find out who we are and why we are here, and by extension, what we're supposed to be writing. So, the only way to figure out what you're supposed to be writing is to start writing. So please, when you are faced with these assignments, don't let them overwhelm you. Start writing something. Email me, talk with me, and that's how we're going to be able to get through those assignments together. Don't be afraid to start writing. Don't be afraid it won't be perfect. You can work with something, right? Once you get those words on the paper, kind of difficult to just sit there and stare at a blank page and make something appear. So just start writing. Okay, start writing what's on your mind, what comes up for you. So, with that in mind, I'd like to talk to you about Polaroids. So, Polaroid cameras are making a comeback, as many of you might already know. And so I want to go ahead and show you an example of what they look like in case you haven't seen them before. So here they are. Okay. So the thing about Polaroid cameras is that the first Polaroid camera was sold in Boston in 1948. So that's almost 80 years ago. And over the years, the technology has improved. By the late 1990s, the Polaroid was replaced by cameras with rolls of film and eventually the digital cameras we know and love today. However, the Polaroid is making a vintage comeback. So many of you have probably seen the Instaphoto counterparts in stores. Fortunately, as storytellers, we can experience the magic of the Polaroid without actually owning one. But this requires that we pay very close attention to the moments we often take for granted. So I'm going to show you what I mean with this small selection, again from Bird by Bird by Anne Lamont. Okay, so this is from her section on Polaroids. Writing a first draft is very much like watching a Polaroid develop. You can't, and in fact you're not supposed to, know exactly what the picture is going to look like until it has finished developing. Watch this Polaroid develop. 6 or 7 years ago, I was asked to write an article on the Special Olympics. I had been going to the local event for years, partly because a couple of friends of mine compete. Also, I love sports, and I love to watch athletes, special or otherwise, so I showed up this time with a great deal of interest, but no real sense of what the finished article might look like. The last track and field event before lunch was a 25-yard race. They lumped and careened along, one man making a snail-slow break for the stands, one heading out to the steps where the winners received their medals. Both of them were shepherded back. Finally, though, everyone crossed over the line, and those of us in the stands got up to go when we noticed that way down the track, 4 or 5 yards from the starting line, was another runner. She was a girl of about 16, with a normal-looking face above a wrapped and emaciated body. She was on metal crutches, and she was just plugging along one tiny step after another, moving one crutch forward 2 or 3 inches, then moving a leg, then moving the other crutch 2 or 3 inches, then moving the other leg. She crossed the finish line, and you could see that she was absolutely stoked in a shy, girlish way. A tall African-American man with no front teeth fell into step with me as I left the bleachers to go look for some lunch. He tugged on the sleeve of my sweater, and I looked up at him, and he handed me a Polaroid someone had taken of him and his friends that day. "Look at us," he said. His speech was difficult to understand, thick and slow. His 2 friends in the picture had Down syndrome. All 3 of them looked extremely pleased with themselves. I admired the picture and handed it back to him. He stopped, so I stopped too. He pointed to his own image. "That," he said, "is one cool man." And this was the image from which the article began forming, although I could not have told you exactly what the piece would end up being about. I just knew that something had started to emerge. After lunch, I wandered over to the auditorium, where it turned out a men's basketball game was in progress. The African-American man with no front teeth was the star of the game. You could tell that he was, because even though no one had made a basket yet, his teammates almost always passed him the ball. Even the people on the other team passed him the ball a lot. In lieu of any scoring, the men stampeded in slow motion up and down the court, dribbling the ball thunderously. I had never heard such a loud game. It was all sort of crazily beautiful. I imagined describing the game for my article and then for my students. The loudness, the joy. I kept replaying the scene of the girl on crutches, making her way up the track to the finish line. And all of a sudden, my article began to appear out of the grayish-green murk, and I could see that it was about tragedy transformed over the years into joy. It was about beauty of sheer effort. I could see it almost as clearly as I could the photograph of that one cool man and his 2 friends. The auditorium bleachers were packed. Then a few minutes later, with no score on the board, the tall black man dribbled slowly from one end of the court to the other and heaved the ball up into the air and dropped it into the basket. The crowd roared, and all the men on both teams looked up wide-eyed at the hoop as if it had just burst into flames. Okay, so what we have here, is a relatively sensitive topic, but it's transformed, right? Because Anne Lamott is describing the pure joy and emotion that happens at these Special Olympics. And we get to see the real life human characters developing behind this event. So what begins as sort of a moment where Anne Lamott is attending this event because she has some friends there and she's kind of interested in sports, is actually transformed by this Polaroid and by these emotions described and shown by the participants in this event. So what I want you to do this week is I'm going to challenge you to look for moments in your life where you feel impatient or nervous or bored. Now, all of these feelings, they're uncomfortable, okay? They're going to lead you to pull out your phones and scroll through social media, fidget in your chair. Sometimes you even get frustrated with friends and family. And yet, in those moments, if we pay attention, there are often valuable stories that can help us better understand the stories we read and even create our own bold and realistic characters. So I want you to identify one of these moments and then jot down what you are seeing and feeling. If there are other people involved, consider what they might be feeling as well. Here's an example. Today I am feeling anxious. As I sit at my desk, I notice my hands shaking. The room is not terribly cold, so I may have simply had too much caffeine this morning. Whatever the case may be, I cannot place the worry on a single issue yet. However, experience tells me it is only a matter of time. I was very short with the cashier at the gas station because I had to wait at the counter for a few extra minutes before they realized I was there and came to ring up my coffee. As they slowly walked behind the counter, I found myself checking the time on my phone and sighing. I quickly inserted my credit card in the machine and mumbled "yeah" in response to their "thank you." What I failed to consider is the lack of concern I felt from them in that moment may have been exhaustion from a long shift. Perhaps they were ready to go home and spend time with their family. Maybe this is where I will allow my worry to remain today, so I might do better in future interactions when I feel myself getting impatient. So now, again, it's your turn. I want you to write a response to this prompt. When did you feel impatient, nervous, or bored this week? What led to that moment? Was anyone else involved? What might they have been feeling? And can you learn anything from that moment? Because the truth is that if we can learn something from our difficult moments, the characters we create can learn something from theirs as well. Experiencing the messy parts of life allows us to connect with fictional characters and understand that they are not always good, evil, or even redeemable. The best characters are complex, imperfect creations. We can only capture one piece of their puzzle in a picture, but we need every piece to complete the puzzle, especially if that piece helps us connect with and believe their story. So, this should be anything from 1 to 3 paragraphs about your experience. Go into detail, you guys. We've practiced this for several weeks now, so we're talking about things you see, hear, feel, smell, taste, but we're also connecting with other people who may have been involved in this moment. What were they feeling? We're going to explore empathy here so that you can understand how your character's actions might affect other characters in a story, and how that might contribute to the overall plot. So we will continue this assignment next week with a poem based on your documentation of this event. So please make sure to be thorough so you can choose the best information to complete your poem. Again, my email address will be in the notes for class. Will also be in the PowerPoint presentation. I will have virtual office hours this Wednesday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And your assignment will be due on Friday, April 23rd by 11:59 p.m. Okay, thanks guys. Let me know if you have questions. Have a great week. Bye.